Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. As some of you have no doubt noticed, I post new episodes to YouTube every Thursday. And this particular episode will be going out on Thanksgiving Day. So I thought, what better time than Thanksgiving to let everybody know how much I appreciate the great information, the really interesting and fun comments, and all the support I've gotten from viewers since launching this channel back in March of the year. It's really been terrific and I really appreciate it. Thanks everybody. And I wanted to talk about some of the specific interesting comments that have come in over the last month or two. Starting with episode 2, Blondie Chaplin and Ricky Fattar. If you haven't done it yet, I really urge you to go back to that episode and look at the comment from Ed Taduri, the drummer and percussionist who worked with the Beach Boys in the early 70s. He's got a very interesting, really fascinating comment about what it was like to be part of the band during the Blondie Ricky years. And Ed, I really appreciate that comment. By the way, Ed Taduri is currently the founder and director of the Rhythm Arts Project. He's been involved in a lot of really worthwhile causes and he just seems like one hell of a great guy. So thank you, Ed, and really check out his comment. It's really fascinating stuff. Episode 11, Elton John meets the Beach Boys. Joel Goldenberg and somebody else also, and I wasn't able to find the comment, so I really apologize for not giving you credit, but Joel Goldenberg and another viewer confirmed for me that the song Chameleon was the song that Elton John slaved over to give to the Beach Boys in 1975 that they never recorded themselves. And it's really a shame because it would have been a great song to hear the Beach Boys do. I can well imagine Carl singing lead with a nice vocal arrangement. Would have made a terrific kickoff to a side of an album that would also feature things like It's Over Now, Still I Dream of It, maybe Brian's re-recorded version of In the Back of My Mind. Could have made a great side around the Beach Boys' Love You period, something on par with Beach Boys today. Unfortunately, according to Joel Goldenberg, the Beach Boys thought it was too introspective, which I can well imagine some of the members of the band might have thought that. They didn't record it, a real missed opportunity. Another missed opportunity that was confirmed by reading Endless Summer Quarterly is the fact that for the 1991 Two Rooms album, Elton John originally asked the Beach Boys to do a version of his song Harmony from the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album, which again would have been a beautiful, introspective song. Mike Love apparently wanted to do something more upbeat, i.e. easier. They did Crocodile Rock instead, which was like the obvious choice and easy thing to do. It comes off more like a Mike Love solo track than anything else. Again, another real missed opportunity. I would have loved to have heard the Beach Boys do Elton John's Harmony on the Two Rooms album. Another interesting piece of quasi-Beach Boy Elton John information came from Toni Tennille's memoir, which I recently read. In it, she explains how she came to sing backing vocals on Pink Floyd's The Wall album, along with Bruce Johnston, who did vocal arrangements. According to Toni Tennille's memoir, Pink Floyd was very impressed with the work that Bruce had done on the vocals for Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me on the Caribou album, and wanted him to come up with as close an approximation of that sound for The Wall as possible. To that end, he got Toni Tennille, who had sung on Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. Fortunately, he didn't get Carl, who had also sung on that. I would have loved to have heard Carl on The Wall. But that's how Bruce ended up doing vocals and vocal arrangement, and Toni Tennille ended up singing on The Wall. Moving on to episode 31, the issue with reissues. Leopoldo Petriesca commented about the proposed Feel Flows box set, which would package unreleased material from the early Warner Brothers era. And I think I'm with everybody watching this channel when I say I would love to see that. I know there's some great unreleased stuff from that period. I'm sure there's some things that we've never even heard about from that period that would be terrific to hear. I'm not sure that the Warner stuff is going to get the same kind of treatment as the Capitol stuff. That 50-year copyright extension thing that went into place in Europe, which I'm sure most people are aware of, has resulted in some great releases from Capitol over the last 8 years or so. There wasn't much in 1969, but the Beach Boys didn't really record a whole lot in 1969 that was unreleased. They spent a lot of the year on the road. So I didn't expect much out of last year's last batch of Capitol stuff. But starting with 1970, of course, There's a lot of really cool unreleased stuff. I'm just not sure that the people who ultimately own the Warner's material, I'm not even sure who that is now, are going to treat it the same way as the people that did the Capitol material. Also, I think there's less of a panic about that 50-year copyright extension now than there used to be. Early on, you saw, archival releases from Dylan and the Beatles in addition to the Beach Boys. I think record companies have kind of relaxed about that. They're not as worried about it, so it may take a little more time. But obviously, I would love to see that material released. Moving on to episode 32, the Beach Boy album covers part 4, I had mentioned that Smiley Smile was the only major rock release that I could think of until the mid to late 70s that didn't have a photo or illustration of the band anywhere on it. Zippo-Light pointed out that there was one other. Ironically, the Kinks' 1966 Face to Face album does not feature an illustration of the band anywhere on it. Thanks, Zippo-Light, for that observation. In that same episode, I had asked about the meaning of the Beach Boys' 2020 album title. Both Shane Fleming Films and George Fidgen pointed out that if you include live albums and greatest hits packages, this was the Beach Boys' 20th album. And George goes on to speculate that the 2020 may talk about clarity of vision for the band, or people seeing that they had moved on from the Brian Wilson period and seeing them for who they are now. I think that's a pretty good speculation as to what the meaning might be. Thanks to both of you for those observations. Following episode 35 about the Beach Boys Cafe, I heard from John Savala, who actually went to the cafe several times back in the early 90s and had the forethought to collect a lot of the cool ephemera produced by the Beach Boy Cafe. Things like flyers for bands that played there. He's got matchboxes, menus, and he very, very generously shared with me a Beach Boys Cafe matchbox and an original Beach Boys Cafe menu. The menu has one item named for each member of the Beach Boys. There's the aforementioned Brian Wilson Kokomo appetizer platter, Mike Love's grilled vegetable salad, Bruce Johnston's garden burger, Al Jardine's macadamia mahi-mahi, which actually sounds pretty good, and Carl Wilson's sizzling prime rib steak. I actually had an opportunity to talk to John. He's a longtime Beach Boy collector. He's had a lot of really cool, really interesting experiences. Over the years, he's met each member of the Beach Boys apart from Dennis. He even met Audrey Wilson at a certain point, has a lot of great stories to tell. I really enjoyed talking to him. As far as the matchbox, I'm going to keep this in a place of honor up here in the Beach Boy cubby of fame, so to speak. And I'd like to put the menu up here as well, but it's a little bit too big. And I'm also really worried that this color newsprint will fade pretty fast if I leave it exposed to light. So I definitely want to keep it in nice shape, don't want to fold it, don't want it to fade. I think I'm going to have to put it in a cardboard sleeve and put it with things like concert programs like that, just to keep it from getting dog-eared. But if anybody has any suggestion for a good way to display this, I really don't want to frame it because I want to be able to open it up once in a while and look at it. But if anybody's got a good idea how I could display this thing nicely, please let me know. John, thanks again. I really can't thank you enough for taking the time and trouble and for your generosity to send me those items. Much, much appreciated. Also in that episode, I asked what would be the coolest items to see in a Beach Boys museum, and I got some great responses. Quiet Jarvis suggested the striped shirt outfits from 1963-1964. Kevin McElhaney suggested Brian's piano in the sandbox. Tony Balls also suggested those items along with Brian's bathrobe and Wrecking Crew lead sheets for Pet Sounds and Smile. Johnny G thought of some of the great 70s outfits that particularly Mike and Brian wore, along with Carl's Rickenbacker, Mike's saxophone, and some bigger items like Brian's bed, which I really thought was great, and even Dennis's boat, the Harmony. Matt Durkin thought of some Smile era items like the fire hats that the Wrecking Crew wore during the sessions for the fire segment, and handwritten track revisions for Smile, which really would be very cool to see. He also suggested some of the fabric for the tent that was in Brian's living room. I'd like to thank Matt Durkin and his website, favoritevegetable.com, again for suggesting this entire topic with his very cool Beach Boy Cafe t-shirt. I see he's got a new shirt up there, and Add Some Music to Your Day shirt. So check out favoritevegetable.com. There's some really, really cool stuff there from Beach Boy fan Matt Durkin. On episode 35, the Beach Boys 1965 Part 2, Outlaw Rickenbacker pointed out that Girl Don't Tell Me was not, in fact, Carl Wilson's first lead vocal on a Beach Boy record. Way back on Surfin' Safari, he had shared lead vocal duties with David Marks on Summertime Blues. Thanks, Rick, for pointing that out. Also in his comments on that episode, George Fidgen mentioned that in high school he knew somebody who had Help Me Rhonda stuck on repeat on his car stereo. And it made me wonder what would be the best and worst Beach Boy songs to have stuck on repeat in your car. You could do a lot worse than Help Me Rhonda. I'm not asking what are the best and worst or what are your favorites and least favorites, but which ones would stand up best to repeated listenings and which ones would drive you crazy fastest? Be an interesting question. For me, I think for best, I'd probably go with Cool, Cool Water. I mean, one, I love it. Two, it's got a lot of varied parts in it, so it would be less monotonous. And also, for some reason, I just don't hear that as often as I'd like. So Cool, Cool Water would probably be the easiest for me to take. Worst would probably be something like Boogie Woody, which is not terrible, but on repeat, it could drive you insane. You also are not going to be at all dignified driving around playing Boogie Woody, especially if you're on a date or something. So that'd be my best and worst, but I'd like to hear what you think. What would be the best and worst songs to have stuck on repeat on your car stereo? Also in that episode, I asked, what other rock albums would you like to see resequenced? Kevin McElhaney came up with a great suggestion about Side 2 of the Rubber Soul album. Side 2 kicks off with the song What Goes On, which is one of the weakest things on this album. It definitely screams out to be in the middle of Side 2, not starting Side 2. Kevin, that was a terrific observation. Tony Balls talked about replacing the track Joey from Bob Dylan's Desire with the B-side Rita Mae. And I am all for getting rid of Joey on this album. I agree with most people that it's a track that really drags the album down. My suggestion would be to replace it with Abandon Love, which was recorded during the sessions. Sounds great, was not released until 1985. Actually, as long a track as Joey is, you could throw it off and probably put both Abandon Love and Rita Mae on here. Bob Dylan albums are certainly the easiest to second guess for their track listings after everything from about John Wesley Harding forward. You can always second guess what Bob Dylan chose to put on his albums. Another interesting suggestion from Tony Balls was about the Who Sells Out lead track, Armonia City in the Sky. It's the only track on the album not written by a member of The Who or even sung by a member of The Who, although Daltrey's doing some backing vocals. It's written and sung by Speedy Keen. I'm not even really sure why it's on a Who album. Great suggestion, Tony. Thanks for that. Moving to episode 36, Two-Lane Blacktop, I'd asked if anybody was aware of times that the Beach Boys had played someone other than themselves in television or film, apart from the 3 or 4 times I was aware of. George Fidgen did some really great research and came up with several. Ricky Fataar, of course, reprised his role as Stig O'Hara in the much-maligned Ruddles 2. He also appeared as an unnamed percussionist in the Eric Roberts film The Coca-Cola Kid in 1985. Blondie Chaplin played a bartender in 2001 in Shooting LA, and in 2011 he appeared as an unnamed musician in All Kids Count. Interestingly, George also found Brian Wilson listed as playing a rock promoter in the film My Own Private Idaho in 1991. Now, Brian here is spelled with a Y, though on the IMDb database, it's connected to R. Brian Wilson with an I. I think that's a mistake. It's probably a different Brian Wilson, and there's just a bad link on that database. But does anybody know was Brian Wilson in My Own Private Idaho? I'd be interested to know. Anyway, thanks for the work on that, George. Really cool research. And by the way, George, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your last name. Please let me know if I am. After episode 37, Bruce Before Terry, I heard from the Hot Rod and Surfin' Scene, who listed some great Bruce-related titles that I hope to talk about in a future episode. Also, if you get a chance, check out the Hot Rod and Surfin' Scenes YouTube channel. He's got a really extensive Gary Usher documentary there. And don't be put off by the fact that the documentary is in Swedish. You can pretty much infer by context what's being talked about, and more importantly, you get to hear and see some really cool obscure records. I urge you to check that out. Outlaw Rickenbacker provided a link there to a really cool interview with Bruce done on Art Fine's Poker Party in 1990, and it really shows you why it would be so great if Bruce were to write a memoir. He tells some great stories. Of course, Outlaw Rickenbacker also pointed out that he had heard that Bruce says he has no intention to ever write a book, which would really be a shame. And finally, after episode 39, the Beach Boys 1977 Part 2, I heard from Joel Goldenberg, who tells me that Brian's reworked version of In the Back of My Mind was available as a bonus track on No Peer Pressure in Canada, as well as in Japan, which I wish I'd known at the time. I probably could have saved a few bucks on the Canadian version over springing for the Japanese version, but there you have it. Also, Joel says his information is that that track was recorded in March 1975, and I believe I've seen that date somewhere myself too, but I couldn't track it down. Keith Badman's book says it was recorded around the period of October 76. I think Joel is probably right. It sounds like a different period, but does anybody have any additional information on when that reworked version of In the Back of My Mind was recorded? I'd really like to know. Thanks, Joel, for those comments. I really appreciate it. As usual, there's more to talk about than we have time for. Again, I'd really like to thank everybody for the support, the good comments, the good information. This has really been a terrific experience for me. Also like to thank people like DJ L33, I believe he goes by DJ Lee. Let me know if that's true. Minix Music, Giggins, Digna Felicima, Brian Kruger, Myopia 2020, Denerd 89, Frank Allison. I'm really sorry that I didn't get to talk about the Rolling Stone 500. I would really like to have had time to get to that. There are many others. I'm sure I've forgotten some people who are really key, and I apologize for that. But please accept my humble thanks for making this channel so much fun for me. If you're watching this on the day, have a great Thanksgiving. If you're watching it afterwards, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and will have great Thanksgivings in the future. I appreciate you watching. Thanks and goodbye.